All right, everybody, it's Blake Schwank with Colorado Computer Support. Who I'm talking to today is Ron Bebus. Bebus, right?
Bebus, yep.
Bebus with PrivaPlan, and we just went through a tabletop exercise with him yesterday, and I just wanted to interview him about that. So, Ron, tell me a little bit about your company.
PrivaPlan Associates, been around for 24 years or so. David Ginsburg started it back as HIPAA started coming out. He is the leading expert in the nation on HIPAA, and we have a great team of people who help do security risk assessments, document review. We outsource compliance officers, security officers. We've done internal reviews, remediation assistance, documentation assistance. We do a lot of phishing testing. We are the HIPAA experts in the nation, and PrivaPlan has been working long and hard for our customers to help them with any questions they have. And so one of the things we've been focusing on the last couple of years has been disaster planning. Okay, we've really been helping people get their disaster plans, their incident response, their business continuity plans documented. And then now the latest thing that we've been taking on the last 2 years are helping them do tabletop reviews, where we come in and run a scenario with the teams. And those have been very eye-opening for everybody to learn about their current status and what they can do to get better for disaster planning.
Yeah, and we just went through one of those with you yesterday, and we found you guys, we started working with you, probably 5 years ago or so, because a lot of IT guys, a lot of MSPs will go do security risk assessments for their clients. They'll maintain the IT, and then they'll go audit themselves. They'll inspect themselves. And when we met, I really liked the idea of you guys keeping an eye on everything and actually doing the assessment, doing the audit. And then, it is a little bit concerning as an IT company that, oh my gosh, they're going to find something, right? And we'll get in trouble. The client that we both work for is then going to be upset, but it's not been that. I mean, there's probably nowhere that you go that you don't find some gap that needs to be remediated. And to bring that out in the open so that the client can budget for it, the IT guys can plan it out, because most things you can't just flip a switch and make happen. Do you usually find there's always some gap, or?
Gaps are going to be part of IT. The bar is constantly changing. Best practices keeps changing. New rules come out. Every site we go to, we help them identify, what risks they have inherent. And then we help them figure out a remediation plan, whether we're working just with an internal IT department or an MSP like yourself. I'm a big fan of a separate entity doing the audit versus doing the day-to-day work. Okay. That hen in the hen, or dog in the hen house, or fox in the house phrase, whatever that phrase is, and we've had MSPs that have balked. They want to do it so bad because they are very protective. You guys have been very open, receptive to the second set of eyes looking at things. It's very important, I think, to get that. We've done security risk assessments for over 20 years. We have been doing on-site, personalized, customized risk assessments. It's not a checklist that people fill out themselves and, yes or no answers. We're actually diving in and making sure that they understand what their risks are. And you guys have been great at taking that and coming back with good plans for remediation and educating your customers on, what's the best way to mitigate the risk that might be identified by our scans or our testing.
Yeah, because a lot of it's not necessarily an IT problem, it's a budgeting problem. Some of these new tools that the cyber insurance and that compliance is forcing us to implement could be 10, 15, 20 bucks per workstation per month. That's more of a CFO problem than it is an IT director or CIO problem. So
many times in PrivaPlan, from the large hospitals here in Denver down to a single provider operation of a clinic, we really run the gamut in our customers, and we take that into account. We're not, I would say we're solution agnostic. Okay. We want the customer to understand the risk and to mitigate that risk in the best way they can. But we're not coming along and saying you've got to have this very expensive product. You're right. Budgeting is a big part of IT, which cycle you're going to get that particular tool in. But many of our customers have learned that doing nothing, it will bite you. And that's where we have run into it. So it's good to go through it. 20 years ago, when I started with these guys, the RSRA report was delivered and ignored. I would come back the next year to do a follow-up, and nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. That's not the case. In the last 10, 15 years, all of our customers have really stepped up and responded to the recommendations. They understand the risk now. There's been enough out there, enough education. I'm excited to go back and see how our customers have gotten better year after year after year. Working with MSPs has been a big help, because then they can figure out and prioritize where they should go after things first. We don't dictate that. We just report and help them understand and educate them.
Yeah, it is nice to get it out there on a plan. And, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, we know that the next year you come around, we're going to have improved. But so yesterday, though, was part of that. So, we've got the strategic plan, the budgeting, security risk assessment. Yesterday was something really unique, I think, that you guys do. And it was a tabletop exercise at one of our rural critical access hospitals, which is, I think it's a 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive for you. It was 2.5 hours drive for us to get down there. And they have a challenge hiring the right people. They've got some phenomenal people in IT right now, but having the depth is really hard because they're in the middle of nowhere, Colorado. What did you do down there yesterday? What was the process we went through, and why?
I told a story of my first disaster plan when I worked at a nuclear plant in Kansas. I was a young engineer in charge of the CAD system, and my first disaster plan was 3 sentences long. 3.
For a nuclear plant?
At a nuclear plant for the CAD system, not the whole plant, just the CAD system.
Okay.
But it was 3 sentences, and it was, I will evaluate the disaster, I will design a solution, I will implement the solution. I'm a young engineer, full of myself, and my supervisors took that as a disaster plan and they signed off on it. Times have changed. I've come a long ways. Disaster planning now is much more about designing all the steps you'll do to mitigate a disaster. What are you doing ahead of time before the disaster strikes? A tabletop review is, to me, one of the most fun activities IT can do because nothing is on fire. We're not hyped up on adrenaline because everything's down and burning and not working and our disaster plan has to get implemented. And we got to get all the people together and the resources to solve the problem. That's hard work and it can be very stressful. A tabletop allows us to take that scenario while we're sane, our adrenaline's at a reasonable level, and we get to audit ourselves. Are we prepared with good documentation? Do we have good training? Have we tested all of the things we say we'll do? Do we have redundant systems in our systems and in our staff training so that we know? Our testing will give us the baselines. A tabletop gives us that chance to walk it through with the various departments and make sure we're ready. What usually comes out of it, 9 out of 10 times, will show where we're not ready. And that's okay. That's the purpose of the tabletop, to do our lessons learned. Where do we need to improve prior to the disaster? And that's why this scenario, everybody comes out of there with a positive feeling of, I can do this. I can take these things and make it better and get us closer to being ready for the next disaster. I'm a big, big fan.
Yeah. Well, and it even just reduces the stress because you've thought through it. If nothing else, even if you don't complete all the documentation that you walk out of there thinking that you need, it does, having dealt with the idea and walked it through, makes it a little smoother, right? A little less stressful.
I try to keep the tabletop in a reasonable format. There are some companies I know that will run a tabletop and it is an elaborate production. They'll actually have videos of newscasters saying about the disaster striking the facility. I mean, They do a lot of things. They bring in, lots of people, every department. What I find, if it gets too big, too elaborate, you have many people in the room who aren't engaged. Somebody else is engaged, 2 people over there engaged for an hour, or 2 departments, and I'm not engaged for part of that thing. I would rather keep it small, tight, fast, pushing each person when they use a phrase of I think, I assume, I hope, I probably. These are phrases that let us know we're not ready, and we need to dive in and see where aren't we ready, and we can identify that. It's a great way to do it, but keeping it small. I think the largest one I've done is about 32 people at one time, and that's a good size and less to keep it focused. So a lot of times I will keep tabletops separated. I'll have an IT tabletop. We run the scenario. We get a timeline of recovery. We take that timeline, and then we have a second tabletop with the other departments, the medical staff, the administration staff, CEOs, the C-suite people, and we see what they would do during this process. But I don't have them all sitting in a room having the C-suite people bored while IT is telling us how they're going to set up a server and recover a backup. That's just not a good, effective use of people's time. And our tabletops are tight, fast, everybody's engaged. We do a lot of round robins where everybody has to, give their input of what they would be doing at each moment in time. They're a fun activity. People can really engage with each other and learn from each other.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting too that we had one of our engineers, senior engineers, Jesse, was on site with you at the hospital.
Yes.
Janelle and I were dialed in on Zoom. And normally a lot of times if you're the Zoom guy, you can sit there, read the news, buy plane tickets, go through your email. But, I found that you'd be asking Jesse questions, and then all of a sudden you'd turn to me or Janelle and go, all right, is that how it works? And what would your next steps be? And I'm like, oh gosh, I guess I have to be engaged here. And you did that. You did a great job of that.
Well, I think a successful tabletop is everybody's in the moment thinking about it. We usually introduce a wrinkle at some point. Maybe we kill somebody off, just something happens, or maybe something that somebody just did, some task that they just did backfires and breaks in our scenario. We get a lot of creative license in things and get to stretch our technology a little bit to make people think. And it really does. It brings everybody to the table and keeps them there. We've had help desk staff in the meeting with the regular admins and things like network engineers who can come up with really good ideas of how to assist, how to make things better, sanity check things that are being said from a different perspective. So everybody in our tabletop is usually very engaged and tuned in. And like I said, we do the round robin. So we do keep it moving so that everybody's going to get called on for their input. And they learn that quickly, and so they stay engaged. Yeah.
Well, and you just talked about killing somebody off, which maybe we'll send them on vacation, or they're somewhere without cell coverage. But you also talked about, especially in some of these rural places, you end up with somebody with a huge personality that tries to take over the room, and they have all the knowledge, right?
Well, a good facilitator is one of the roles is to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. Because that person is going to be a target for me. They're a single point of failure. If they're not available, other people have to pick it up. So when I say killing somebody off, I do mean removing them from the disaster recovery scenario for some reason, so that other people have to step up, and we have to learn who are those other people, who are our backups. And I have seen a lot of deer in the headlights when we ask somebody who is their primary person to step back. But it's always rewarding when everybody else steps up. And that's what the lessons learned are from these things. This guy's very important. We need to distribute his knowledge across the board more, cross-train more. And coming out of there, it's really good to see what people are identifying for themselves. I mean, I could walk in and tell you how you should run your disaster. That's not a facilitator of a tabletop. I want you to run your disaster. I'm going to facilitate the process of communication and openness and engagement. So that's what makes it fun for me.
Yeah. Now, have you, do you have a couple ahas, something? I mean, what have you learned out of this that people could do as a takeaway of things they really need to focus on in their hospital or their practice?
Well, many people in disaster recovery use the acronyms, RPO, RTO. These are very common things that we want to do. We need to know that from business continuity. What does the business need to stay in business? And that's our role as an IT and other departments to keep things running. But what I've found is that the most creative ideas for streamlining recovery can come from anybody. Okay. And they feed off each other. And that's why these are nice. We have had CFOs come up with ideas of, hey, well, could you do this on the recovery of, we've got 800 workstations that have to be re-imaged because of a ransomware. And the CFO might be the one who can figure out how do we get the resources to not just do 10 at a time, but do 50 at a time and get them turned around and back up much faster. And so I love how you never know where the next great idea is going to come from to help out. We've had legal come to the meetings when the C-suite comes on, and they are creative, thoughtful. They are able to bring different ideas, because one of the biggest dangers of any disaster recovery plan for an organization is for the staff, the culture, to think that it is a IT disaster recovery plan. No, it's a facility, it's an entity, it's the organization's disaster recovery plan. IT is a big part of it, but they're not the only part. Every other department has to be on their game, and a tabletop gives them the chance to show that they're truly ready also. So I'm a big fan there.
Yeah, because it does involve everybody. You might need a different space to move to. You might need money. You might need people. You might need, who knows what you need. So, well, and then you throw twists in it. I mean, I came into yesterday's tabletop thinking, it's going to be ransomware again or something else. And you threw at us that, all the switches had been nuked, and we had to, come up with a rebuilding the network, not the servers and stuff, but rebuilding the networks. And so you never know. A lot of times we get locked in our narrow way of thinking of this is what an attack's going to look like, especially when that's all making the news. So
there are a lot of known attacks. There's a lot of new attacks coming. Our tabletop concept is to stretch it a little bit and make us work a little harder. The last thing I want is a scenario where, I'll just run setup.exe and I'm back up and running. No, we want to think it, engage it, get everybody going. And our scenarios have become more and more robust so that the other departments have to stretch. It's one thing for an organization, a healthcare organization, to go to paper for an afternoon. It's another when they have to go to paper for a week, or 8 days or something. And now they have to store that paper and protect it and really make sure they have enough paper printed out already. So there's a lot of other details that go into it when we stretch the scenario over time and over complexity. So
yeah, we
can do that cheap on a tabletop. It's man hours and it's organization, but we're not breaking something first. We're taking care of it before it. It's a lot easier to schedule a tabletop than to schedule a disaster. And
yeah, exactly. And you get to have donuts and lunch and coffee and everything else, and nobody's stressed. So
that helps a lot.
Great. Yeah. So if somebody, if there's a hospital out there or a medical practice that wants to try out one of these tabletops or needs a security risk assessment, how do they, who is PrivaPlan? How do they find you and engage with you guys?
PrivaPlan.com. We just revamped our website and our toolkit this year. It's looking good, but it's also a great way to go. Our admin staff will respond quickly to any request for information for any of the products we offer. Tabletops are a great way, and we work with the teams. We'll probably have 2 to 3 meetings prior to the actual tabletop as we help define the right scenario, make sure we have the right attendees for it, and work together to make sure that we don't waste anybody's time. We're getting the most out of it every time we run a tabletop by having being prepared and being ready. So David Ginsburg, our CEO, he is the expert, and he can help direct to all the resources we have.
Okay. And how do you spell PrivaPlan? I always get it wrong.
PRIVA and then PLAN. PrivaPlan. No T.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And after yesterday, we do need to. I want to go through tabletop with our team of some sort, and because I think it would be really interesting to take it. I mean, as an MSP, we're a business associate. We had you guys come in and do a security risk assessment of us, and so now I think the tabletop's something else to try with our team to see how we do and make ourselves better. So, what's that?
I think if we sat down with Janelle, she and I could come up with a very good scenario for you guys that really stretches your team and gets them to learn a lot about where they're ready and where they can be more ready. Yeah.
And as far as rural health, and that one other thing here, quick plug, you mentioned a couple times with our mutual client yesterday, the benefit of having Colorado computer support, helping them out versus internal versus some other, a little MSP. Can you expand on that a little bit?
It's hard to find quality staff for rural hospitals in small towns. And especially now in Colorado, as even the small towns are becoming very expensive places to live. It's very, very hard sometimes. But if you're choosing an MSP, you've got to look for the technical expertise, but also the size, so that there's enough resources to help you during a disaster and enough expertise and qualifications to help you in day-to-day, design for future, and understanding the best practices for your hospital or your organization. So yeah, you do not want to go with too small an organization that just can't support you at the quality you need. I think CCS has got a proven record for the 20 some years you've been in business. The staff you have, every one of them I met has been great, but the redundancy and the coverage you have, there's not just one person who's going to be a single point of failure from your team causing your client to be at risk. So big fan of that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. And thank you very much for your time, Ron.
Hey, glad to help. Hopefully they can use some of this.
Yeah. And if you guys are out there, if you like these videos, please give us a thumbs up. Make sure you click down below to subscribe and check them out every week. And then you can find us at www.coloradosupport.com or find us at 719-439-0599.